Arguably the best known Japanese warships in the modern day are their super battleships. This is not surprising considering their size and post-war fame. Yamato got a museum, an anime, multiple ones actually, and at least a couple movies dedicated to her. That ship is very well known as a result. Musashi, on the other hand, is perpetually in that shadow. Even her wreck is less well known in that regard. This also shouldn't be surprising, because Yamato's wreck was discovered relatively early, while Musashi took a long time to find. That doesn't take away from the effort to locate that wreck, or the lives lost aboard her. It's just worth keeping in mind as we look at Musashi. Before that, though, the usual bit of background on how she sank. On October 18, 1944, Musashi set sail with most of Japan's remaining surface force. These ships, ranging from destroyers to the massive super battleships, were sailing towards the Battle of Leyte Gulf, Japan's last throw of the dice, in a battle that has had rivers of ink spilled over it and its results. For Musashi, this would end poorly. On October 24th, the Japanese Center Force, Musashi included, sailed through the Sibuyan Sea. The powerful formation was spotted by an aircraft off USS Intrepid during this process. With the location of the Japanese fleet identified, air attacks soon followed. Musashi would be a particular target during this attack. Such a fierce attack, in fact, that the exact number of hits she took is disputed. As we'll see, the wreck doesn't offer any clues here either. In any event, Musashi was hit by somewhere between 10 and 20 torpedoes, as well as, again, somewhere between 10 and 20 bombs. The exact number is probably somewhere in the middle, but it does depend on which source you use. Combined fleet gives 19 torpedoes and 17 bombs, while noting that the ship's own logs state 11 torpedoes and 10 bombs. Regardless, Musashi took a pounding that no ship could hope to survive. Around 7:40 p.m. on October 24th, 1944, Musashi slipped beneath the waves. 1,023 of her crew went down with the ship. Her story, at least as an active warship, ended there and then. The story of her wreck, as well, went unfinished for decades. This isn't to say the wreck was forgotten. Multiple attempts were made to locate the ship over those decades. As it turned out, the wreck would only be located fairly recently. A little under a decade ago, as of this recording, in 2015, with the announcement of that discovery coming in March of that year. This was one of the earliest discoveries by Paul Allen's team of shipwreck hunters. So early, in fact, that it was before they acquired RV Petrol for their exploration. Musashi was, instead, located by a team on Allen's yacht, the Octopus. This was the culmination of an 8-year effort, from digging through records and searching the Sibuyan Sea. Musashi was located at a depth of around 900 meters, 3,000 or so feet, in pieces much like her sister. The amidship section was blown to pieces, with the bow, as far back as the number 1 barbette, laying apart from the stern. The bow is upright, as we'll see later, while the stern is inverted. As for the superstructure and amidships area, well, that's scattered wreckage, with the bridge and funnel lying on their side. With all of that out of the way, let's look at the pictures of the wreck now. Beginning, of course, with probably the most distinctive of all images taken of the Hulk, Musashi's bow jutting out of the darkness. Notable in Japanese fashion for the remnants of the imperial chrysanthemum. This would have been gold-covered teak and has rotted away over the years. However, the mounting point remains and is a reminder of what used to be there. The bow itself is also pretty intact, at least from this angle. The unique flair of this class is still clearly visible. Even the starboard anchor, seen here, remains in place. That anchor, by the way, weighs 15 tons on its own, because nothing on these ships is small. Moving back from the extreme bow, though, there aren't a lot of pictures of this area. Or, at least, pictures that are identified as being on the bow. That said, there is one area I can say for sure is on this part of the ship, and that's the forward barbette, empty of its turret. This fell out as the ship sank, although the bow righted itself at some point on the way down. In the modern day, it leaves a gaping hole looking into the ship. Silt and the darkness makes it impossible to make out much detail, but it's still an important pair of pictures. You don't often see something like this, after all. These are some of the only pretty pictures of the ship, however. The following images are going to be a lot of twisted debris. This, for example, is evidently the remains of a 5-inch gun mount, or a 12.7 centimeter mount, to use the proper terminology. Although it's so broken up and covered in mud that it's almost impossible to tell that. Other areas of the wreck, like this one, are little more than silt-covered debris. Not that these pictures aren't worth looking at, because they are, but it does mean I can't really tell you what they're showing, because frankly, I'm not sure myself. Take this, for example. It's a valve from an engineering space. A valve for what? I don't know. I've only ever seen it described as a valve wheel from a lower engineering area. Perhaps the writing on it explains more, but it's very faded, and I don't speak Japanese to begin with. If someone wants to take a swing at translating what is there, by all means feel free. As for the next image, it's more twisted debris. This is what appears to be the base of a rangefinder, although it's been torn and broken up by the force of the sinking. Now, all of that said, there are recognizable pieces of debris. The bridge structure, for example, is heavily damaged, but still has identifiable pieces. This area, for instance, is on the side of the superstructure. You can see it, and its fire control equipment, on the surface in this picture. And here you have the compass platform, which is a different part of the bridge. While this bit right here is one of Musashi's massive rangefinders, supersized as everything else was on this monster of a battleship. Behind it there's the command bridge, although it's shrouded in darkness and difficult to make out. The next picture looks like it's part of the bridge as well. And to be fair, it is from the superstructure. However, according to the expedition video, this was an aft-facing spotting platform. It's fairly intact, all things being equal, considering the superstructure detached from the rest of the ship. It does still have issues with silt coverage, even on the inside, as this closer-in shot of the same area demonstrates. Moving on, there are 3 more images of recognizable debris. First off, we have another of the common pictures of the wreck. This is a stern catapult that detached and drifted down when the stern inverted. It's probably the second most used picture of Musashi after the bow chrysanthemum. The second of these pictures is of a larger piece of debris. This is, specifically, one of the secondary battery turrets. And in the case of Musashi, the word turret does actually fit, considering these battleships use the triple 6-inch turrets removed from the Mogami class during their refit. Exactly which one this is would be hard to confirm. As mentioned before, Musashi's amidships section blew apart during her sinking. Everything behind the first turret's barbette, until you reach the overturned stern, is gone, or reduced to shattered rubble. This is either the turret mounted directly ahead of the bridge, or the one mounted above the stern turret. Either way, it's lying on its side on the bottom in the modern day. Looking inside the turret is possible, as seen here, because the guns fell out at some point during the sinking, quite possibly blown out by the explosion that broke the battleship apart. As for the third picture, well, that's a fairly common shipwreck image. at least on capsized wrecks, that being one of the propellers or screws of the battleship. This one is particularly impressive because of how shiny it still is. These are often covered in silt or otherwise fouled up. On Musashi here, this looks like it's fresh from the factory, ignoring the marine life clinging to it anyway. That said, while it might just be the angle of the image, it looks almost like the shaft itself is bent a little. It wouldn't surprise me if that was the case, with how violent the sinking was, not to mention the air attacks. However, with that covered, there's only a couple pictures left. These are from the debris field, not the ship herself. First, we have the remnants of a scout aircraft. And I say remnants because what little remains has been compacted down into the mud. It's flattened out and only barely recognizable as an aircraft at this point. Certainly nowhere near as well preserved as the aircraft that sank with USS Lexington. The final image, meanwhile, is what appears to be a boiler. This likely fell out of the ship when she broke. You see this on other wrecks, like the aforementioned Lexington, or the far more famous Titanic boilers. This particular boiler is partially buried in the mud, although the distinct shape is still visible. It also seems to be resting atop other wreckage, but the mud makes it difficult to say what that debris is. In any case, that brings us to the end of this video. Musashi is an interesting wreck because she broke in a similar way to her sister. There aren't a lot of cases like this that I can think of, and the wreck itself is interesting to look at for its sheer scale, as well as the breakup. Although it's a shame she didn't sink in one piece. That just leaves Shinano for a potential intact wreck, and that ship was converted to an aircraft carrier. With that aside though, a final note. This is just a selection of pictures from a much wider look at the ship. If you would like to see other parts of the wreck, I'll link the video of the expedition itself. If you don't mind sitting through, or alternatively skimming through, a 2.5-hour video. My video here is a brief summary in comparison. Thank you for watching. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoy the content, and I'll see you in the next one.